Hello, everybody. And I have a question for you. Have you ever worried that when you're starting inquiry in your classroom, that you are going to hit a point where all of a sudden the conversation stalls and you have absolutely nothing prepared behind you and you're not quite sure what to do next, and you might still have quite a bit of time left to fill? Well, tonight we're going to talk about the strategies that you can have in your back pocket so that if you encounter those times, which you most likely will, you will have some go-to strategies that you can use to help fill that time efficiently and effectively while still engaging in the inquiry process. So, hi again, and thanks for joining me for episode 38 of Teaching with Inquiry Live. And tonight, we are talking about how to implement inquiry in your classroom and those back pocket type of activities that you can have just in case things don't always go your way. And I am Patty, and I'm a junior split grade teacher and teacher blogger behind Madly Learning. And I am here every single week helping teachers fit it all together and make teaching with inquiry accessible, functional, and fun for both teachers and their students. And tonight's episode especially is brought to you by my brand new course, Inquiry 101, which is a free 6-week session email inquiry course that will let me help you get started on using inquiry in your classroom and give you all the information you need to get started. So if you want to check out and sign up for the Inquiry 101 course, you can head on over to my website at www.madlylearning.com and sign up for the Inquiry 101 course and get the first lesson delivered to your email tomorrow. So again, tonight we are on episode 38, and we are talking about those back pocket strategies that you need just in case something doesn't go your way and something happens and you've got some extra time to fill, because I think that sometimes that is one of the big worries and fears that many teachers have with inquiry, because it does present itself as being a tad bit less planned than a structured traditional lesson. So when you have that and you have something where you think something might take a little bit longer and it doesn't, or you ask a question and you might hear crickets and you're not quite sure what to do next, it's always good to have a few strategies in your back pocket that you can use. So I'm covering 3 different types of strategies that you can use to help fill time effectively and efficiently with your students. And I've grouped those into 3 categories. So I have review type activities, activate activities, and then your plain old just backup things that you just kind of need to have prepared. And I'll give you a hint as to what are some of those easy backup strategies that you can do. So first, let's look at the review type activities. So when you're looking at review, so all of a sudden you get to a point in your lesson and things just kind of stall out. Well, it might be a good time for you to go back to previous lessons and look at some of the review type activities that you can do. So you can quickly ask students to make up some review questions. So go back and look through their notes or think about the things they've learned and have them come up with some review questions. You can have them then take those questions and quiz one another, do an inside-outside circle where you have students rotating and meeting new partners every time, and they ask themselves that question and get discussions going. That might eat up about 15-20 minutes of time. It also, because you're having students do something independently, might give you that 5-10 minutes that you need to quickly pull one of those backup lessons up so that you can fill in a bit more time. Another activity that you can do is you can have your students teach a partner a concept or learn something that they themselves are discovering out. So if you've done an independent inquiry and you have students where they may have learned something that another student in the class hasn't, a great way is to teach 3. So you can have the students pick in a group of 3, and you can have the one student teach the other 2, and then they rotate. And they have to tell, you can give them a certain number of facts or pieces of information that you want them to share with their Teach 3 partner, and you can have them explain all different concepts that they themselves are learning. Another activity that's really quick and easy to kind of go on the fly is Scoot. So if you have students, as you use the game of Scoot for review, this is also a really good strategy. So if you have every student in your classroom and you have each one of them go back through some of their notes or reflect on some of the learning they've done, and they come up with one type of question, and you can give them a challenge that has to be either a thick, a thin, or even a hot question. You're looking for Scoot, they're quick, so you probably want to stick to the thin or the thick questions, and you want to have them write those questions down on a sticky note and then put them at their seat. Then you give each student a blank piece of paper and you have them number them 1 to however many students you have in the classroom. And then you set a timer. And every minute the students go to a different sticky note somewhere in the room. They write down what number. So you had your students number their sticky notes. And then they have them write down the number of the sticky note that they're answering, and they write down their answers. This is a good one. If you've got 20 kids in your class, it's probably going to take you about 20, 25 minutes to help fill, and it's a great review. And then you can also grab a little bit of assessment there as well. You can also do just basic review where you just have them working perhaps independently to review. They survey, they quiz themselves, they can make up their own quiz, they can make a quiz for a partner on something that they have learned. So you really want to get them going back and reviewing what they've learned in the past and having them kind of test themselves and quiz themselves and really question what it is they've learned. So the second type of activity that you might want to have in your back pocket is an activate type activity. So this is where instead of reviewing previous information, you're going to activate future information. So you might look at where you're going next. So you would have to know what the next step is, where they're going next. You might not have anything prepared for it, but where they're going next, you might have a big idea in mind. So with the activate, you might want to give them that big idea and tell them what kind of concept you're moving on to next. And you might have them doing activate activities such as a question and answer. So they're coming up with a question, and then they're going to hypothesize about what that answer might be with others. You can use a graffiti write where you put the big ideas or you put a couple of questions. You can even use some of the questions that they themselves have generated off the Wonderwall. And you can put those questions at the top of a chart paper, put those around a room, and give students 5 minutes per chart paper. And they can come up and write as many ideas as they can about that big idea and topic. You can do a brain dump. So if you're looking at doing a brain dump, you're going to want to have them activate their information on 2 different categories. So with a brain dump, I like to look at splitting a paper. So you just give them a piece of paper, splitting it into 4 quadrants, and you have them write down what they know in one quadrant, what they want or need to know, why they think it's important, and any extra thoughts. And they just kind of get out any of their ideas about the main topic they can think of. No right, no wrong answers, but just dump and empty all of their thinking and thoughts from their brain onto the paper, and then you can have them share. And again, these are big ideas of what you're going to be doing next, as opposed to something that they've already learned. So this is about new information because you're activating what they're about to do. You can also do what I'm going to call a think storm. So a think storm is similar to a brainstorm, except it's done as a collective. So if you think about a think storm, you're going to have different questions, and you're going to pose those big idea questions around the room. So you might have about 4 or 5, depending on how you'd like to group your students. And you're going to, at the top, put there, and you're going to pass these pages around from group to group. And you're going to have each person write something different about that. So it's a little bit different in the graffiti write in the fact that there's a bit more accountability, that the students have to write something on every paper, and the questions might be a little bit different. You can have students generate the questions and then have them reflect on that. That might be another way that you can get them to do that as well. And I like any of these because often those are student-centered activities that they're going to be engaged in doing something, which might give you a couple of extra minutes to quickly pull something new out so that you can move on to the next thing if you don't have anything quite ready for those moments. Now, the third thing, and if you've got any strategies that you can think might fit into this, please feel free to put those in comments or to send me a message and let me know the different things that you also do that might help, your different strategies that you might use to review or activate, and we can all share our ideas there as well. So the third one is where you just have to have some backup lessons prepared and ready to go. So almost think of it like an emergency supply plan, which is great because you actually use it for an emergency supply plan as well. In case one of those days you're not there, you can totally rely on one of these activities to just as a go-to for a substitute teacher. So with a backup, some of the things I like to do is just have ready available is an article that students can read and then they can talk about after. So they can ask questions. So I'll sometimes read an article and then do some of those activate questions that we were just talking about. So if I have an article either printed, or sometimes I will just have articles accessible in the live binder. Now, sometimes newspaper articles are great for this because they're often opinion pieces about things that are somewhat related, but they're topical. So they're not maybe necessarily the next thing that we're going to be doing. If we didn't cover them, it wouldn't be a big deal, but they often are great at getting a discussion going. And then if you're going to give them an article, you can have them do a retell, a reflect, and a connect for that, and they can share kind of the things that they're learning. You can also quickly, if you've gone to the next things, if you're always one lesson ahead. So some of the things I like to do is always having, I know where I am now and I know what I'm going to do today, but I also want to know where I'm going to go to next and kind of have that ready. So I always have my laptop available to me in case I need to quickly get something off of that and perhaps project that onto our smart board or somehow getting that over there. I also can easily do that because I share all of my files are in Dropbox. So you can do that with Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive. If all of your files are on a cloud service and you have all of your pieces of technology linked up, it's a lot easier to pull down those things from your drive because you can then project it or show it or share it that way. So if I can access the files that are in my Dropbox through my iPad or through my computer or even through the computer that's attached to my smartboard, if I can't necessarily print an article, I at least can pull it up on a screen, or I can just simply read it, or I can share that article with other students through Google Classroom. And I always like to have at least one article printed somewhere, or even an article from a textbook that I know is there in case I need to pull that out. Sometimes this is how I use some of those Nelson literacy resources that are related to the curriculum, or perhaps an old textbook that I don't totally rely on all the time. But it's great to know, okay, I know there's an article about this, this, and this that I can quickly pull out when I need to that doesn't require me to photocopy anything. And then if I use some of those activate strategies, I can then have an activity for them to do really quickly. So always having one of those backup articles that I can go to when I hit that lull, perhaps that comes sometimes, and knowing what the next lesson is. Sometimes as simple as just pulling out your curriculum and looking at some of the teacher questions that are in the suggested teacher section are also great to just simply pose a question for your students, something that they may have covered or not covered, and exploring that with students is another great way to just pull out that big idea and just kind of getting them talking about it and getting them sharing their ideas. Looking as well as a reflect and a connect, so they can reflect on something that they've learned and try to start connecting ideas between different concepts. So if you're looking at, okay, pull out all of the facts, write them all down on a chart paper. So if you can pull out the different things that they've learned and make a list of some of the things they've learned, so you're thinking more of a reflection piece. And then you build on that and you say, okay, can we connect any of these ideas? Are any of these ideas related to other ideas? So if you can do that connection piece, that might be good to do regardless of whether you need to kill some time. But if this is something that you need to fill some time with, some of these are also great options to do kind of in a pinch. And finally, I think one of the other things to do is to give them the big idea, but also do a research and report. So if you've got a question, so if you've got unanswered questions on your Wonder Wall, use those questions to the best of your advantage to take one of those great questions down that may not have been explored yet and give them to students and have them research and report back as to what they have found. And it doesn't have to be a big, huge inquiry question. Sometimes that's a great opportunity to take those thin questions or even some of the off-topic, thicker questions and take those and start looking at answers so that you can just check, so students can just check those off on their wonder wall. As those have been answered, they might be related, they might not be related. So those are kind of my go-to strategies that I use for those inevitable times where you might have underplanned what was going to take, or maybe your students just aren't in the mood for kind of what's happening and things don't necessarily go as planned. With inquiry, there's going to be times where you have moments that it's not necessarily going to take as long as you expected, or things might happen. You might have a digital snowstorm where all the tech goes down. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that, where you relied on one thing, you wanted to show something with technology, and all of a sudden the tech goes down and you need something in a pinch. So if you've got these backup strategies, kind of a go-to thing that you can do, then it feels a little bit less scary for us as a teacher when we feel that out of control feeling, when we don't have something to rely on and we've got, 25 kids staring at us and we need to do something and we need to do it quickly. So those are go-to inquiry strategies. And there's always the tried and tested, pull the book, kids, and read it too. So that is it for our Teaching with Inquiry Live episode number 38, which is amazing that we've gotten this far. So if you liked this video, please head on over to www.teachingwithinquiry.com to access all of the content that's related to tonight's episode, including the blog post that will run through all of those strategies that we talked about today. And it will also give you links to the video and podcast replays from this episode and previous episodes as well. And once you're there, you can sign up to get exclusive access to the free resource library, which includes all of the content and content upgrades that I give from previous episodes and much more, including some special fun goodies that I find buried deep in my Dropbox that I like to include in the library. And you can also take this episode with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast replay at podcast.teachingwithinquiry.com. And if you are a podcast listener, I would love if you could go on iTunes and leave a review for the podcast. That would mean a whole heck of a lot to me. And I would really appreciate the time that you take to do that. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thanks very much for watching, and we will talk to you next week. Happy teaching, everyone.